On a number of our wildflower outings, we've been struck by the way in which a floral model or design that is especially successful at attracting a wide range of pollinating insects is adopted by many species of flowers across many different families sometimes. The most familiar example of this is probably the frequency of yellow radially symmetrical flowers where the nectar is readily accessible by short-tongued insects. And competition between the flowers for the pollinators is reduced by flowering at different times of the year or living in different habitats, so that we get a succession of species with this particular floral model right through the floral year. So we have lesser celandine at the beginning of the year, followed by aconites and buttercups, various members of the rose family such as silverweed, cinquefoil and tormentil, dandelion, and an entire procession of dandelion types like hawkbits, hawkweeds and cat's ear. But an equally good example of a floral model that is widespread and successful is the umbel, where you have a flat plate visually striking of white flowers, individually small and simple in structure, where the nectar is easily accessible to insects with short tongues. So through the floral year we have a whole succession of umbelliferous flowers, beginning with cow parsley in the hedgerows of spring, then followed by hogweed and hemlock, in turn by angelica, wild carrot, etc., etc., a whole succession of umbelliferous flowers. So you might think here in the cemetery at Tunnahal at the beginning of August, what we are looking at here are somewhat overgrown pignuts competing with the tall surrounding vegetation. But this is Burnet Saxifrage. The Burnet part of the name taken from the resemblance of the basal leaves of the plant to salad burnet, which is an entirely different plant, and the saxifrage from its use in ancient times to treat stones in the body, gallstones, kidney stones and so on. Saxifrage, the word saxifrage in Latin means stonebreaker. The Latin name for Burnet Saxifrage is Pimpinella saxifraga, the pimpernel coming from the Latin word for pepper, a reference to the peppery taste of the leaves, or the hot acid juice of the long taproot, which was used as a cure for toothache at one time. The 5 anthers release their pollen one at a time, and only when all have done so do the 2 styles raise themselves erect, a now receptive stigmatic knob at the end of each one. They receive a considerable variety of insect visitors, but seem to be especially popular with hoverflies. In times past, Burnet Saxifrage was considered a nutritious fodder plant, and it was much valued for its medicinal properties. Apart from its stone-breaking reputation, John Gerard, in his famous Herbal of 1597, recommended it as a heart stimulant and for treating wounds of all sorts. And the juice, mixed with something to mask the bitter taste, for contagious diseases such as plague. Burnet Saxifrage also featured in the traditional healing manuals of the professional physicians of medieval Ireland, inheritors of a centuries-long European tradition that was smothered and extinguished with the collapse of the Gaelic order at the end of the 17th century. And the entry for Burnet Saxifrage in those ancient healing manuals is of particular interest because it's one of the species that are not found in the medieval Latin sources on which these Irish manuals were based. It's also a very good example of how complex and detailed, bizarrely so at times, the prescriptions in the old healing manuals were. You see, the medieval medical tradition out of which they came was based on an understanding of human well-being that was, if not entirely fictitious, unscientific, But at the same time, it was tempered by the physician's assessment of the individual patient's state of health and filtered through the strainer of the hereditary physician family's long experience of dealing with these matters, including their familiarity with the local Irish flora. So this is the entry for Burnet Saxifrage. It's in Irish, so I'll read the English translation for you. Burneta, that is Burnet Saxifrage. This herb greatly relieves the veins from their pain and from their poison, and from the poison of the vein of the forehead. With it take chamomile, foliage of betony, foliage of germander, asparagus, red fennel, foliage of oak, and flower of red rose. Pound these things, boil them in fresh butter and a little of the pith of rose. Press them through a cloth and put them in a covered vessel. If the mixture is rubbed on the forehead and the temples, it will stop the headache and bring on sleep. In the same manner, mix a handful of this herb together with roots of plantain, snake root, a handful of maidenhair spleenwort and hart's tongue fern. Boil these herbs in rainwater, strain them, mix the juice with milk, boil it with bread, and if it be given to drink, going to bed and getting up, it will help with the flux of dysentery. Again, if the same herb is cut with a knife, mixed through with the foliage of mint, wormwood, calamint, and the seed of fennel, the mixture boiled in wine or in ale, and then put in a box. If this is put hot on the diaphragm, it will give great comfort. At the end of our first season, we talked about the O'Shiel physicians, and we visited the site of their castle at Ballyshiel near Belmont in County Offaly. In a couple of weeks' time, we'll visit the library of the Royal Irish Academy in Dublin, where the largest collection of herbal manuals of the lost Irish herbal tradition is housed, to view for ourselves the Book of the O'Shiels and some other of the medieval healing manuals in their keeping.